Video games have been a cultural significance to our world whenever it's them with campaigns, survivals, or online multiplayer, as they have been the source for interactive entertainment. Major developer companies also have their own mascots, with the likes of Super Mario for Nintendo, Sonic the Hedgehog for Sega, which both have spawned numerous franchises and titles throughout the years. However, there is one familiar place where it's also an icon in its own rights, but it should have had many installments before, while also achieving the same level of popularity as Mario and Sonic, a game where you can run and jump and shoot, which is being the one and only Megaman. Megaman is one of the most underrated gaming icons of all time, as it spawned numerous series and spin-offs throughout the years, with the classic series being the most iconic, beginning in 1987, along with another recognizable icon from Capcom, Street Fighter, followed behind by the X series of course, which is canon to the main timeline. Mega Man 2 is no doubtly the most iconic game of the series, with over 1.5 million copies sold just before Mega Man 11 dethroned 2. But I'm not gonna lie, Mega Man 11 has to be one of my most favorite games, but we will get later into that, or maybe for a future video. The second game has introduced a handful of gimmicks that will later be used as templates in the following Mega Man games, such as 8 Robot Masters and the Wily Castle stages. But although this may get repeated over time, each Mega Man game has their own aspects, differentiating them from another, in chronological order to the timeline. So sorry for the long wait guys, because I planned to make this video a very long time ago, but it didn't came to pass because I was busy with a lot of stuff. But now, here we are going to be reviewing the first 6 classic NES Mega Man games, and ultimately ranking them from least favorite to the best. And without further ado, let's begin off with the first 3 games. So let's first begin with Mega Man 1, the start of the classic series. And despite its much better, powered up version, which is a remaster of this game, I wasn't really quite a fan of the first original Mega Man game, as the movements were a bit sloppy at the time, concerning that it was Mega Man's earlier days at the time. I might kind of say it's fair enough and let it slide. So the first guy was Bomb Man, and his stage was easier to navigate through, as well as his boss fight, so I've easily beaten him with the Mega Buster. So although the charge and slide features were not introduced at the time, it was still quite easy for me to navigate without them through stages, and so I continued to go after the bosses within weakness orders. And so I have entered Gutsman stage in Hell. The moving and flipping platforms always get me on the first part of the stage. Then the rest and even the boss fight itself are easier throughout the game, if you have the Hyper Bomb. Next is one of the most easier and first stage bosses for people is Cutman. Stage design is basic for a first level, and fight is easier to deal with if you have the super arm, but the normal Mega Buster also clears him easily. And for the last 3 elemental themed Robot Masters, I have chosen Elect Man. And hell, it was very tricky to navigate through his stage, since you need to climb up without falling down because of enemies knocking you over. And once when I fought Elect Man, he deals a lot of damage. And with my first encounter with him only ending in a draw, which is thanks to the rolling cutter I had, which is one of his weaknesses. So I have beaten him in the second round thanks to my skills of dodging his attacks. And don't forget that I also received the magnet beam from his stage. And so I have headed out to Iceman stage, and for the first parts of the level were easier until I came across the floating platforms, in which I have used the magnet beam to get across until I have died off screen thanks to me going too much high. I have passed the floating stages once again and got to the boss fight where I easily beaten down Iceman with a few electric blasts. Finally, I have headed out to Fireman stage, and it was much easier compared to Iceman's. I could easily freeze the flaming obstacles. And so I have beaten Fireman with ice slashers, and why? Because fire melts ice and ice turns into water which extinguishes the fires. Finally, I have entered one of the most difficult stages in the game, the first Wily stage. And only near before the boss fight, it was very tricky to get across the last obstacles because I always rely on my magnet beam to get across the pit of spikes, and even this closed hollow point where I needed to use my magnet meat extensively to get to the top without wasting my ammo. And when I get to the boss fight, it was surely hell. The moving blobs really deal a lot of damage to me, so I have to carefully avoid and dodge them, while also using the thunder beam as its weakness to deal more damage to the boss since E-tanks at the time weren't a thing yet. I have died numerous times until eventually learning its attack pattern and how to avoid it, but I haven't beat the devil with the so-called pause glitch in which I have heard of after beating the game. The next stage was easier than the previous. As I progressed through, I've met a rematch of past robot masters like Cutman and Electman. While it was being more of a drop-down stage, I would eventually face off a Megaman clone, in which I would have expected to replicate my moves on a one-on-one copy, but instead, it chose to attack me first. And so this Megaman clone aka copy robot got destroyed by my firestorm. Eventually, I will go down this drop-down stage, where I would end up in a water level that propels my speed further thanks to the flowing water currents in which enemies will flung at you in your way, like these enemies who resemble bullet bills from Mario, as they explode upon death. And then I have fought the CPU boss, in which I have defeated its first lower forms with the rapid buster spamming, and then finished it off with the super arm by throwing rocks at it. And finally, we are on to the last stage of the game. In the final Wily stage, I have used the magnet beam to get across the moving platform area until I met the final gauntlets of the Robot Masters, in which I have lost a lot of health thanks to numerous damages taken, and sadly that they didn't drop any health points after being defeated. And so after beating the 3 last Robot Masters without dying, I have finally came to face with the first Wily machine. The fight was quite difficult, and so I had to fight the machine by using one of its numerous weaknesses: the rolling cutter, the firestorm, and the thunder beam. The Wily machine definitely deals a lot of damage, but after remembering its attack pattern and predicting its moves, I would barely defeat the Wily machine on a high diff scale, in which this boss was actually more trickier than the Yellow Devil. And asides, I have completed the first game. And now for my most favorite features of the game that I like the most. I enjoyed Cutman and Electman's themes / stages and fights while also harnessing their weapons, but Bombman will always remain the most nostalgic parts of the game for me, always reminding me of the beginning of Mega Man's first journey. And I may also favor the Wily machine fight, despite it being one of the hardest bosses and being in a stage that I have struggled with. But now, it's time to move on to one of the most iconic games in the series, the sequel, Mega Man 2. So now I'm only summarizing the games and not the whole thing like I did with the first game, since it might take too long, and would rather describe it in short form. And here, I have played Mega Man 2 before 1 and completed the game numerous times. And while I love the soundtrack and newer status upgrades compared to the first game, the stages and some boss fights in the game may need to be reworked on still, just like how that certain fan Atari remake did justice to the stages in the game as a whole. Metal Man followed by Quick Man are one of my favorite robot masters in the game, as we know that for sure Metal Blade is one of the most overpowered weapons in the Mega Man series, as I have completely shredded throughout the game with this weapon, despite the fact that it doesn't work on some bosses. And so I didn't really go up against the bosses in weaknesses orders, as I just casually played through the game clearing out numerous stages and bosses. For the Wily stages, they were definitely quite a challenge, as I was able to pass the platforms with special items. The first one was easy to go through if you memorize the platforms correctly, as well as the second stage with the Gutch Tank, which is one of my favorite fortress bosses. The third Wily stage, where it has the most fake platforms, so bubbly, and special items were able to help me get them across until I have to face off the Boo Beam Trap. Now with the Boo Beam Trap boss, I needed to use the Crash Bomber to defeat it, or else I would need to restart the battle if I didn't have any ammunition for the weapons left, and it could only be harmed with it and nothing else. After that fight, I was then transported to the boss gauntlet, where I easily rolled every Robot Master with their weakness until facing off the second Wily machine. Now, the second Wily machine wasn't that hard compared to the first version until you begin to face off the alien, where all of your attacks heal the boss rather than harm him, which you would rather use the bubble lead up close in order to damage him, which does 1 to 2 points of damage depending on the difficulty. And so the alien gets defeated only to reveal that it's Wily himself, only for the game to end with a peaceful world for now. And while I have enjoyed many aspects of the game, I did like some of the Robot Master stages and things with the likes of Metal, Quick, Crash, and even Flashman. For the other weapons besides the Metal Blade, I haven't used them that much, but I do like the Quick Boomerang, the Crash Bomber, and the Time Stopper, but the rest are still fine. And like what I've mentioned before, the game definitely deserves a remaster and a rework with all the stages and bosses in the game. And for somebody who is eager out there enough to make a fan game, I wish you can actually do a powered up 2 remake version of this game, and that would go hard. Overall, Mega Man 2 was definitely a great head start and perfect game of the franchise. Next, we're going to head out to the third game. And here we are at Mega Man 3 and the successor to the previous 2 games. Now with the Robot Master stages and fights, they did well with the game designs thanks to the fans at the submission they used to have. And this is also the same game where the slide mechanic was introduced, making it easier to traverse through small areas and dodge enemy attacks. And speaking of stages, with the first one being my favorite Robot Master, Magnet Man, thanks to his magnetic abilities, fight, and even weapon where it can home at enemies, being the Magnet Missile. And he is even more challenging than Metal Man. Now since the Robot Masters don't normally go in basic weaknesses orders, I had to finish off the last 3 with different weaknesses from the rest of the 5, the ones being Snake Man, Needle Man, and Gemini Man. Occasionally I encounter Proto Man whose fights are still cool, but he's just like a Sniper Joe with the Mega Buster while not having the same iframes as the Robot Masters despite one being himself, so I easily cheesed them with the free flying Rush Jet. Some stages like Hardman and Top Man stages were a bit easier to complete compared to the rest of the other ones like Snake Man, Needle Man, and Spark Man stages, but when it comes to later stages like Gemini Man and Doc Bots, it becomes tougher and I have to extensively use rush items to get past obstacles and other platforms. Now, speaking of the Doc Bots, I do love the fact that they are returning versions of the previous Robot Masters from the last game, with the likes of the Mega Man 2 Robot Masters. And they have new weaknesses to Mega Man 3's weapons. But hell, their stages were more challenging than the original ones, as they replaced Needle Man, Gemini Man, Spark Man, and Shadow Man stages. And though, I kinda wish that they returned in the following games. But after all the Doc robots are cleared, I finally came face to face with Breakman, who is just basically Proto Man with a mask on, in which I have cheesed them once again with their flying rush jets and buster spamming. I then headed out to the next Wily stage, where it had these sea turtle bosses where they get faster every time you beat them, as new ones arrive, as their main weakness is the Shadow Blade, which is a faster version of the Rolling Cutter. And then I headed out to the Wily fortresses, with the first stage having the Yellow Devil boss returning, but at least he wasn't as hard as his first appearance, despite having newer attack patterns. And after beating him with the hard knuckle, I then headed out to the third stage. Was tricky to pass by thanks to the moving platforms and spikes, but I was able to go through it and eventually face off the returning 3 Mega Man holographic clones, in which I used to beat them with the Search Snake, though they were weaker than Copy Robot from the first game. After completing the Robot Master Gauntlet on the final stage, I then face off with the third Wily machine, which it wasn't that tough as compared to the first and second Wily machines, as I also easily cheesed them with the Rush Jet and Buster spamming, just like how I did with Proto Man. And my final battle was against Gamma, who Dr. Wily was controlling, and in background, Gamma was built by both Dr. Light and Wily as a second robot to protect the world other than Mega Man when Wily was quote-unquote changed at the time before the events of the game. He was ultimately demolished by the top spin on the head. Seems like Wily has perished after the fight, as we see some rumble falling on top of him. Or did he? But after that, the credits roll and showcases the original 6 Robot Masters from the first game, while also revealing that Proto Man is Mega Man's first older brother. Now with my final thoughts about the game in conclusion, it's a very good game with more expandable campaign and extra bosses while having more unique enemies and a more challenging experience. And though Magnet Man and Gemini Man are my favorite robot masters from the game, and with more likable weapons that could be on par with Mega Man 2's and being better than 1's, as well as with the stage layout being better than 1 and 2's, I can say that this game is definitely better than the first Mega Man game and on par with the second, even though I like the soundtrack of 2 better. Mega Man 3 is definitely one of my favorite Mega Man games. And now, let's head on to Mega Man 4. And here we are in Mega Man 4, and this is the same game where the Mighty Charge Shot has debuted. Although the soundtrack was alright, the game itself is pretty good at an average level, but not on the same levels as Mega Man 2 and 3, but still better than 1. Now I do love many aspects of the game, such as constantly charging up my buster to fire charge shots to shred through enemies, and with the Robot Masters being submitted by fans during a contest in the 90s, and with the game's new plot of Dr. Wily being somehow gone, and with Dr. Cossack being the new antagonist with leading his own army of Robot Masters. Like with the previous Mega Man games, I cleansed all the stages and beat the bosses using their weaknesses. Toadman was one of the easiest bosses, but he still deals a shit ton of damage thanks to his acid rain, and along with Brightman and Diveman being the quickest damage dealers. Since this game has 2 collections of endgame castle stages, along with Cossack being the first one, the Square Machine fight was definitely tough despite it moving quickly, but thankfully the Dust Crusher deals more damage to it. The special weapons in this game are quite alright, but I still have to save them up for weaknesses against certain bosses, so I have to rely on my normal Mega Buster throughout stages. The following bosses like the Twin Cockroaches and even Cossack were easy to deal with until it was revealed that the legendary mad scientist himself was behind blackmailing Cossack with his daughter to do his bidding to destroy Mega Man. In all. So next we are taken to the Wily stages, and the first boss we encounter is the Giant Mental Daddy, who is quite an easy boss to deal with along with the Giant Chute, or that thing being called the Taco Trash. So after getting past the previous Wily bosses and the Robot Master rematch gauntlet, I then face off the Wily Machine, who wasn't much of a health challenge compared to the 3 previous ones, as its charge shots deal 4 damages. But still on its second phase, it's hard to reach for the nose of the Wily Machine, in which you need to damage it, while the other parts are impervious. And so I was able to beat its second form with the Mega Buster despite its tiny hitbox, and even when I tried my best with the Drill Bomb, it sometimes doesn't work. So I followed the escaping Wily onto the last stage of the game, where I face him off with his first Wily Castle, in which body is so impervious that not even the Mega Buster charge shots could even damage it. It hides in the dark and it attacks in different angles and directions. Overall, my best shot against the Wily Capsule was the Pharaoh shot, as it was very effective against it. And as the game ends, we get a remix of Mega Man 2's title theme in the credits, and it slaps. So for the overall parts of Mega Man 4, I did like the stage designs and layouts for the likes of Ringman stage. But with the soundtracks, Diveman and Brightman slap so hard, but I could also say that it's better than 3 and 1's music. The story is alright, and I also appreciate the fan-submitted characters for the Robot Masters that have debuted in the game. And finally, overall, I put this game on the same level as 3 and almost close to Mega Man 2. And next, we're going to head out to the following Mega Man game that might be better than this. Now we are at the 5th era, and also my favorite out of the last 3 Mega Man games for the NES for many reasons. Now with the robot who looks like Proto Man is leading a group of new masters who are uprising after Dr. Light gets kidnapped, we are now introduced to the newer Mega Man chapters and aspects, notably the better Mega Buster and the soundtrack. As now the new Super Mega Buster has a shorter charge time and a stronger blast. The first guy I fought was Starman, where I've completely shredded through both his stages and fight. After that fight, I begin to run the Robot Master stages and their boss fights, defeating them easily with weaknesses orders once again. Though I recall that the stages may be a bit challenging at least, and the boss fights weren't as tricky as the previous ones. And I'm not quite happy that they've changed the rush coil item into a leaping one instead of the springing one from the previous games. And I have even unlocked this beat character that I can use them for the further fights. Like in Mega Man 4, I have saved up all of my weapons for weaknesses against bosses, and they were still quite decent as I still prefer my main Mega Buster throughout, so I didn't really main any of the special weapons. And so then I headed out to the Proto Man Fortress without wasting any ammo on my special weapons used against the Darkmen. So even the fortress theme fucking slaps. So when I fought the first Darkman, it wasn't that much of a slugger as his weakness is literally the water wave. The following fights were harder than the first one, especially with the guy who looks a lot like that certain Mega Man X series villain. After that, I then faced off Proto Man, who was revealed to be the fake Proto Man in disguise as the final Darkman when the real Proto Man showed up in hell. His fight was tough. I had numerous tries until finally beating him, only revealing that Dr. Wily once again was behind setting up the central antagonist in order to frame Proto Man for betraying him in the last game. So I headed out to the Wily Fortress as the crushing parts were very careful to deal with, and I had to move quickly by shooting down the obstacles and sliding. And so the first boss was quite easy to deal with, being the big pets. The second stage is kind of a challenge until I met the Sorcerer Q9, whose weaknesses is to attack on the inside, and there I shot it with the gyro attack when his shields are up. After running the Robot Master Gauntlet, the Wily Press wasn't that much tough compared to the other Wily bosses after being beaten easily. As then I got transported to the final stage where I faced off the 5th Wily machine and beat its first phase with the Super Arrow. But for the finals phase, I almost thought that Wily would still be immune to the Mega Buster, so I then used Beat to finish him off easily as he teleports and hides away from the range of my most attacks, just like in Mega Man 4. And so the game was definitely more of a breeze than 4 and 3, as we get to see Mega Man lifting the collapsing Wily Castle as Proto Man helps them escape, and once again the Wily Castle demolishes. And now for the conclusion of Mega Man 5. It does definitely have better stage layouts than the previous games, while also having a better soundtrack than 4, and I do love the return of the Wily only made Robot Masters just like in 2. While the weapons of this game are quite decent and on the same level as 4, I still do love the base gameplay style of this game, which makes me put this above Mega Man 4. And now, let's head on to the last NES Mega Man game. Finally, we are at the last NES Mega Man game of the series on the 6th. As this Mr. X person is hosting a robot tournament from around the world where we get introduced into these new native robot masters from their countries, respectively, and with their stage layout and soundtrack inspired by their native countries. And so the Mega Buster's charge shot size was nerfed here, despite it being called the Hyper Mega Buster, when the term Hyper is being depicted above Super. Like, how can Capcom developers even be consistent with Mega Man's character evolution and change? We could have a different charge shot visual in design, similar to the X-Buster's evolution throughout the first NES X game series. But if it's thanks to palette limitations on the classic series games, then I could understand. Aside from clearing some stages at first, we get introduced to newer Mega Man forms, being the Jet and Power form, which have replaced the Rush Coil and other items. Although the Jet form is perfect for navigating through stages, which are still on the same tiers as Mega Man 5, and I still like them, the Power form is more versatile in melee combat, but it's still kind of underwhelming in a boss fight as a charge punch only deals 2 damage, despite it being strong enough to break through large blocks and break through structures and defenses. So that's why Mega Buster charge shots and special weapon weaknesses unironically do more better damage. As for the Robot Master stages, they have standed out more unique styles than 4 and 5 stages as they were more faithful to the robots' backgrounds. I am very fond of Centaur Man and Tomahawk Man stages, and Blizzard Man stages was very tricky, even with the sinking ships and spiked ceilings, foreshadowing the intro stage of Mega Man and Bass, in which I will be covering in the second or third part of this video. Though, while the Robot Masters do pose a good fight, Plant Man's fight was straight up goofy as he only fires his plant barrier. The special weapons version of the plant barrier doesn't actually fire like in the boss fight. As I finished up with the main stages, I then followed up with Mr. X's stages, and the music theme even still slaps like the previous one from Mega Man 5's Dark Man stage. The first stage was extra tricky thanks to numerous spikes placed in the first parts of the level, and I beat the moving blocks boss with my least favorite weapon in the game, being the Flame Blast. At least the second X stage is easier than the previous one, as I was able to fly past the fake platforms, and its boss was easier with the Tomahawk Axe being called the power piston. On the next stage, it was trickier with the platforms I was crossing with vast a bottomless pit, so I constantly used the jetpack which was necessary, while the rest of it was easier. When I fought the metal boss, I instantly blasted him off with the charge shots of the Mega Buster. And finally on the last X stage, the level layout was simpler for the power adapter with breaking blocks, while having little aspects of the previous stage. And then there is this one evil version of Beat that attacks you, so I came across them with the flight adapter. And finally, there is Mr. X's fight that is similar to Sonic 1's Green Hill Zone boss fight, but if the machine stays in place and has a larger wrecking ball that drops energy spills that travel on the floor. So after beating him with my least favorite weapon in the game, Mr. X reveals himself to be Dr. Wily for the third time of trying to disguise himself under a different persona. And this reminds me of 2010's YouTuber face reveals back in the day. Now we are into the Wily stages. The first one where I passed a drop down fall with the spikes in the way as I enter through a secret passage that skips all of it until fighting the dinosaur boss with the Yamato spear. The second stage is where I recall myself clearing out 85% of it with only the Mega Buster and unlocking a secret passage that takes me to the boss fight where I beat the tank with only the windstorm. Now with the second last stage, I passed by the water levels with wind enemies that tried to blow me away into the spikes placed in the level, but I easily passed by them thanks to the jet adapter. And then I face off the Robot Master Gauntlet once again where I beat them all with their weaknesses. On to the last Wily stage. The stage layout was fine but short as the previous stage until I fought the 6th Wily machine. This boss fight was quite easier compared to the previous ones, as I beat the first 2 forms with only the Mega Buster and finished its capsule form with just the Tomahawk weapon to reach it. And so then Wily gets finally arrested, and the credits roll where its soundtrack even slaps harder than Mega Man 4's final theme, which is the same theme later remixed in Mega Man 7's prologue. I gotta say that this game has a better soundtrack than Mega Man 5 and 4, especially with the stages being more unique. But its special weapons are still alright. Now I do love Flame and Nightman as my favorite Robot Masters in the game, despite Flameman's weapon being my least favorite. Plantman and Mr. X's stage and the Wily boss theme are the best soundtracks from the game, though I would put Mega Man 6 near on the same levels as Mega Man 5. And now, let's head on to the final conclusion. Overall, the NES Mega Man games were a great start for the series, and Mega Man 2 has definitely carried it out for the series and helped it expand for even more spin-offs like the X series over time, as well as being on the Mount Rushmore of video game icons along with Mario, Sonic, and Pac-Man as it revolutionized shooter-themed games alongside Metroid. Though, I even wish that Mega Man has the same popularity as Mario and Sonic, or they can develop more titles. Although it has definitely progressed throughout the first 3 games, Mega Man 2 has to be my most favorite one despite some fewer people calling it quote-unquote overrated, even though it's still better than the first one. I still loved its soundtrack, weapons, the first Wily Robot Masters, and how it boosted the game and series as a whole, even though there are still some better Mega Man games than 2. Mega Man 3 is also still good, and I still like the Doc bots more, and I still kinda wish they have returned in the future games referencing the previous titles. And for the last 3 NES games, I chose Mega Man 5 to be my favorite one, followed by 6 being above 4. Well, why? Because Mega Man 5 has better boss fights while having good stage layouts, a better soundtrack, and a visually more effective Mega Buster as it looks better than 6's and 4's, which is why I had so much fun shredding through numerous enemies with it. Although Mega Man 6's final boss fight theme slaps extra hard, Mega Man 5 is still slightly better than 6 with having more challenging fortress bosses and Wily fights. And now that we are done with the NES era of Mega Man, I would have definitely covered more parts of the further games from 7 to 11 and with the spin-offs included like Mega Man and Base, but I decided to split the parts of my video into 3 or more to save more time. And so what are your thoughts about the Mega Man Classic series and which game was your favorite? Let me know down your thoughts in the comment section below, and see you guys in the next retrospective video. And perhaps I would also be covering the X series in a future video, and ciao! And this video took me a very long time to make, with almost 50 recorded lines in the progress and multiple delays. So please respect me for all the hard work I did, as I also drew the video thumbnail myself, and I will be returning sooner again. So this is finally Thriller out again. Ciao.